I'd always thought family was supposed to be a safety net, but mine turned out to be a trap. It was Christmas dinner in our rundown house in Boise, Idaho, when my dad, Greg, dropped the bomb. I was 23, hunched over a plate of dry turkey, when he looked at me across the table and said, "You're a burden, Ethan. Time to move out." My mom, Diane, nodded like it was rehearsed, her eyes cold. My little sister, Sophie, 17 and wide-eyed, dropped her fork, the clatter breaking the silence. I'd been living at home since dropping out of community college, working nights at a warehouse in Nampa to keep us afloat. I paid the electric bill, internet, water, half the groceries too, while Greg lounged, unemployed since the factory closed, and Diane picked up odd shifts at a diner. I wasn't perfect, but a burden? That stung. "I've been paying for everything," I said, voice tight. "How am I the problem?" "You're not a kid anymore," Greg snapped, sipping his beer. "We need space. Pack your stuff, out by morning." Sophie's face crumpled, but she didn't speak. Too scared, I guessed. Diane just stared at her plate, avoiding me. It hit me then. They'd planned this, probably for weeks, while I'd been busting my ass for them. I stood, appetite gone. "Fine. I'm done here." I crashed on a co-worker's couch in Nampa that night, my duffel stuffed with clothes and a few books. Morning came, and I canceled the auto pay on the bills, electricity, internet, water. If I was out, so was my money. I didn't owe them a dime. By week's end, Sophie texted, "Power's off. Dad's pissed." "What happened?" I didn't reply. I couldn't explain it yet. Then it got worse. I'd left my laptop at the house, old, but mine, with job applications and my music. Sophie called, voice shaky. "Mom took your stuff to a pawn shop in Boise. The laptop's gone. She got $200. Said it's family property." My blood boiled. That wasn't hers to take. I called the Boise PD, filed a theft report, and gave them the pawn shop's name. Diane had crossed a line, and I wasn't letting it slide. Not this time. The Boise PD took my theft report seriously, more than I expected. I gave them the pawn shop's name, a grimy spot off State Street Sophie had mentioned, and described my laptop, a scratched Dell, for years old, with a cracked corner from a warehouse drop. My mom pawned it. I told the officer, a tired guy named Martinez. No permission, straight up stole it. He nodded, jotting it down, and said they'd check the shop's records. I hung up, my gut churning. Diane had really done it, sold my stuff like I was nothing. I was crashing at my co-worker Jake's place in Nampa, a cramped apartment smelling of stale pizza and motor oil. He didn't ask much, just let me sleep on his lumpy couch while I figured out my next move. The bills I'd stopped paying were already biting. Sophie texted again, "No internet now. Dad's yelling at Mom." "What's going on?" I typed back, "They kicked me out. I'm not paying anymore. Mom took my laptop, called the cops." She didn't reply, probably too stunned or scared to process it. 2 days later, Martinez called. "Pawn shop had it. Your mom's name on the ticket. Sold it for $200, like your sister said. We're picking her up for questioning." "You pressing charges?" "Yeah," I said, voice steady despite the shake in my hands. "She stole from me. Do it." He grunted approval, and that was that. Diane, arrested. I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow ache. She'd raised me, sure, but this was betrayal. Greg showed up at Jake's that night, banging on the door like a drunk bull. "Ethan, open up," he roared, his voice slurring. I peeked through the blinds, red-faced, fists clenched. "You got your mom arrested? You little punk. Get out," I shouted, phone already dialing 911. "You're trespassing." He kicked the door, wood splintering, but sirens wailed nearby fast. Nampa cops didn't mess around. They hauled him off, cuffs glinting, while Jake muttered, "Your family's nuts, man." Sophie called after, crying. "Mom's in jail, Dad too now? What's happening to us?" "They did this," I said, throat tight. "Not me. You okay?" "No," she whispered. "I'm scared." I wanted to fix it for her, but Greg and Diane had torched that bridge. I was done. Cops or not, I wasn't going back. Diane's arrest hit like a stone through glass, shattering whatever was left of our family. I got the call from Officer Martinez the next morning while brewing coffee at Jake's Nampa apartment. "She admitted it," he said, voice flat. "Pawned your laptop to pay the electric bill after you cut it off. She's charged petty theft. Bailed out already, but she's mad as hell." I thanked him numb. $200 to keep the lights on. She'd sold me out for peanuts. Greg's stunt at Jake's landed him a night in jail too, trespassing and public intox. Jake patched the door with duct tape, shaking his head. Your folks are a train wreck, Ethan. You sure about this? I nodded, jaw tight. They'd kicked me out, stolen from me, cops were my only play. I wasn't sorry. Sophie texted mid-shift at the warehouse, Mom's home, screaming about you. Dad's out too hungover. They're blaming you for everything. I stared at the screen, forklift humming behind me. Blaming me? After years of paying their way, I was the villain for standing up? I replied, they stole my stuff. Sophomore kicked me out. This is on them. She sent a sad emoji, nothing else. I hated leaving her in that mess, but I couldn't save her, not yet. That afternoon, I checked my bank account. Greg had tried logging in, the app flagging failed attempts from Boise. Desperate, probably, with no utilities and no cash flow. I changed the password, added two-factor, locked him out for good. Let them scramble. They'd figure out fast how much I'd carried them. By evening, Martinez called again. Your mom's saying it was family property, defense won't hold, but she's fighting it. Court's next month. You sticking to the charges? Yeah, I said, firm. She doesn't get a pass. He grunted, then added, your dad's got a no-contact order from your buddy's place. Keep an eye out. He's unhinged. I exhaled, the weight settling. Diane in court. Greg barred from Jake's. They were unraveling, and I lit the fuse. Sophie called later, voice small. They're losing it, Ethan. Mom's crying. Dad's trashed the garage. I don't know what to do. Stay safe, I told her. I'm done with them, focus on you. She sniffed, agreeing, but I heard the fear. I hung up, staring at the ceiling. No turning back now. Greg's no-contact order from Jake's place wasn't enough. He'd proven he'd show up anywhere, drunk and raging. Diane's theft charge was a start, but her venom wouldn't stop at a courtroom. I needed them gone from my life, permanent. The next day, I drove to the Boise courthouse, my warehouse shift swapped with a coworker. Filing a restraining order felt drastic, final, but they'd left me no choice. The clerk, a bored woman with a tight bun, handed me forms. Against who? She asked, chewing gum. My parents, I said, voice low. Greg and Diane Carter. Theft, trespassing, harassment. She raised an eyebrow but stamped the papers. I detailed it all: Christmas eviction, Diane pawning my laptop, Greg's door-kicking tantrum. Martinez's reports backed me up. They're unstable, I wrote. I'm not safe. An hour later, it was filed, temporary order pending a hearing. They'd be served soon, and I'd breathe easier. Back at Jake's, I checked my phone. Sophie had called, left a voicemail. Ethan, it's bad, she said, her voice trembling. Mom's selling stuff, furniture, Dad's tools. Says they're broke without your money. Dad's drinking nonstop, smashed the TV last night. I'm staying at a friend's. Call me. I did, heart sinking. You okay, Soph? Barely, she said. They're a mess. Mom blames you for the arrest, says you're selfish. Dad's worse. Keeps saying he'll fix you. I'm scared he'll come after you. He won't, I said, firm. File the restraining order today, both of them. Cops'll handle it. She gasped. You really did that? Yeah, I replied, staring at the duct tape door. They stole from me, kicked me out. I'm done. You should get out too. I'm trying, she said, quieter. Senior year's almost over, then college, somewhere far. I just miss how it was. Me too, I admitted, throat tight. But they broke it, not us. Stay with your friend, call if they show up. She agreed, and we hung up. That night, Jake slid me a beer. Your folks sound like a horror show. Restraining order's smart, keeps him off my couch too. I laughed, bitter. Hope so. They're sinking fast. Sophie says they're selling everything. Good riddance, he grunted. You're better off. I nodded, sipping the beer. The order was a wall flimsy, maybe, but mine. Diane and Greg could drown in their chaos. I wasn't pulling them up anymore. The restraining order hit Greg and Diane like a match to dry grass. I got the call from the Boise Sheriff's Office 2 days after filing temporary order served, effective immediately. Your dad lost it, the deputy said, voice dry. Tried to rip the papers, yelled about ungrateful kids. Mom just stared, then started crying. They're barred from contacting you, 50 yards minimum. Hearings in 2 weeks. I thanked him, a knot loosening in my chest. Jake clapped my shoulder at his Nampa apartment. That's it, man. Legal shield up. They're toast. I wanted to believe it, but Greg's temper and Diane's spite weren't easily caged. I kept my phone close, expecting fallout. It came fast. Sophie texted that night, frantic. Dad's trashed the house, broke a window, screaming about you. Mom's on the phone with someone, saying they'll make you pay. I'm at Mia's, safe, but freaked. I cursed, dialing her. They're unhinged, she said when she picked up, voice shaky. Dad's drunk again, Mom's egging him on. They got the order this morning. Stay put, I told her. Order says they can't come near me, or you, if you're with me. Call the cops if they try. They won't listen, she said, near tears. Mom's saying you're dead to her, Dad's worse. I don't know them anymore. You don't have to, I said, firm. They're done. Sophomore focus on school, get out. She sniffed, agreeing, but the call left me rattled. Greg and Diane weren't just mad, they were spiraling, and I lit the fuse. The next day, my boss at the warehouse pulled me aside. Some guy called here, sounded wasted, asking for you. Said he's your dad. Hung up when I wouldn't put him through. I gritted my teeth. He's not supposed to contact me, restraining order. Can you log it? Already did, he said, handing me a note with the time. Watch your back. That night, I crashed at Jake's, the duct-tape door a grim reminder. My phone buzzed, a blocked number, voicemail, Diane's voice, slurred. You think you're smart, Ethan? Cops won't stop us. You'll regret this. I saved it, called the sheriff, violation reported. They'd pick her up again, maybe Greg too. Sophie texted after, Mom's gone, cops came. Dad's passed out. I'm done with them. I exhaled, the ties snapping one by one. They'd burn out soon. I just had to hold the line. Diane's voicemail, cops won't stop us. You'll regret this, was the nail in her coffin. I handed it to the Boise Sheriff's office the next morning, the deputy listening with a grimace. Clear violation, he said, logging it. She's already on thin ice with the theft charge, warrants out. We'll grab her today. I nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in. Greg might dodge this one, but Diane was digging her own grave. They picked her up that afternoon. Sophie texted me from Mia's. Cops got Mom at the diner. She was yelling about you, handcuffed right there. Dad's still a mess at home. I pictured it. Diane, red-faced and raging, hauled off mid-shift. The theft charge was petty, but this? Breach of a restraining order meant real trouble, jail time. Maybe. I didn't feel bad. She'd stolen my laptop, my trust, let her rot. I called Sophie after my warehouse shift in Nampa, the hum of forklifts fading behind me. You holding up? I asked. Barely, she said, voice steadier now. Mia's mom's letting me stay, school's my out. Mom's gone off the deep end, Dad's no better. You were right to cut them off. Wish I wasn't, I said, leaning against my beat-up Civic. You've got a plan? College, she replied. Applying to Boise State, scholarships, dorms. I'm done with that house. Good, I said, relieved. I'll help however I can, just stay clear of them. She agreed, and we hung up. Back at Jake's, I started hunting for my own place, something cheap in Nampa, close to work. I'd saved enough from skipping their bills, and Jake deserved his couch back. A studio popped up online, $500 a month, utilities extra. I booked a viewing, ready to cut the last tether to Boise's chaos. The next day, the sheriff updated me. Diane's in custody. No bail yet. Greg's laying low, but we're watching. Hearings still on, orders holding. I thanked him, the legal wall solidifying. My boss handed me another note. Greg had called again, but hung up fast. He's testing you, he said. Keep us posted. I nodded, pocketing it for the cops. That night, I signed the lease, keys in hand. A new start. Sophie texted, Mom's begging me to visit her in jail. I said no. I smiled, proud. We were breaking free, step by step, while Greg and Diane sank deeper. My new studio in Nampa was a shoebox, peeling paint, a single window facing a parking lot. But it was mine. I moved in a week after signing, Jake helping lug my duffel and a thrift store mattress up the stairs. Better than my couch, he grinned, cracking a beer on my rickety table. I laughed, the first real one in weeks. No Greg banging doors, no Diane's theft, just quiet, and a lock I controlled. The restraining order hearing was days away, and the sheriff kept me posted. Diane was still in custody, her theft charge tangled with the violation. She's mouthing off in jail, the deputy said. Blames you, her lawyer, everyone. Greg's been served too, showed up drunk, got escorted off. I smirked, picturing him stumbling. They'd face me in court soon, and I had evidence piled high, voicemail, pawn ticket, Jake's door. Sophie called that night, her voice lighter. I told Mom no, won't visit. She freaked, but I'm done. Got into Boise State, full ride. Moving to the dorms in August. Proud of you, I said, leaning against my bare wall. How's Dad? Awful, she replied. House is a wreck. He's selling stuff now, mom's old jewelry, anything. No power, no water. He's falling apart. His choice, I said, firm. They kicked me out, stole from me. Let him sink. Yeah, she agreed, softer. I'm just sad it's like this. Me too, I admitted. But we're out. That's what matters. Work at the warehouse steadied me, extra shifts meant more cash, and my boss logged every call Greg tried, adding to my case. The hearing notice came Boise Courthouse next Tuesday. I'd testify, show the voicemail, the police reports. Diane's theft plea was shaky, Greg's trespassing was documented. The order would stick, permanent, I hoped. Jake drove me to Boise the day before, prepping me. They'll play victim, he warned. Don't budge, your stuff, your rights. I nodded, nerves buzzing. Sophie texted. Dad called me, begging for money. Said mom's ruined them. I hung up. I replied, good. See you after the hearing? She sent a thumbs up. That night, I stared at my laptop, replaced with warehouse savings, no thanks to Diane. Greg and Diane were collapsing, dragging each other down. Sophie and I were climbing out. The hearing would seal it, freedom, legally mine. The Boise courthouse smelled of dust and tension, its wooden benches hard under me as I waited for the restraining order hearing. Jake sat beside me, a solid presence, while I clutched my evidence, police reports, the pawn ticket, Diane's threatening voicemail. Across the room, Greg slouched, unshaven and reeking of stale beer, Diane next to him, her diner uniform wrinkled, eyes red but defiant. Sophie wasn't there, she'd texted, can't watch. Good luck. I didn't blame her. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks, called us up. Ethan Carter versus Gregory and Diane Carter. Restraining order extension, she read, peering over glasses. Mr. Carter, your statement? I stood, voice steady. They kicked me out at Christmas, after I'd paid their bills for years. Mom stole my laptop, pawned it. Dad tried breaking into my friend's place. They've harassed me, voicemail threats, calls to my job. I need them gone. The judge nodded, taking my stack of papers. Greg's lawyer, a greasy guy in a cheap suit, jumped in. Your Honor, Ethan abandoned his family, cut off utilities, left them desperate. Diane acted out of need, not malice. Greg's just upset, no real harm. Stealing's harm. I shot back, heat rising. Kicking your kid out's harm. They don't get a pass. Diane stood, voice shrill. He's ungrateful. We raised him. He owed us that laptop. Sit down, the judge snapped, banging her gavel. I've got a theft charge pending, a trespassing report, and a voicemail saying you'll regret this. Explain that. Greg mumbled, just mad, didn't mean it. Diane glared, silent now. The judge skimmed my evidence, then looked at me. You're seeking permanent protection? Yes, I said. They won't stop, I'm done. She nodded, scribbling. Temporary orders extended, permanent, 100 yards, no contact. Violation means jail. Case closed. The gavel fell, sharp and final. Greg cursed under his breath, Diane's face twisting as they shuffled out. I exhaled, Jake grinning. Told you, slam dunk. Outside, Sophie waited by my car, hugging me tight. It's over. For me, I said, hugging back. You. Dorms next month, she said, smiling. They're nothing to me now. Back in Nampa, my studio felt bigger, safer. The order was my wall, unbreachable. Greg and Diane could rot in Boise's wreckage. I was free, and Sophie was close behind. The permanent restraining order settled like a lock clicking shut, sealing Greg and Diane out of my life. Back in Nampa, my studio became home, sparse but mine, with a second-hand couch and a new laptop I'd earned, not borrowed. Work at the warehouse picked up, overtime meant savings, a buffer against the past. Sophie moved into Boise State's dorms a month later, texting me a photo, her with a roommate, grinning, a tiny room packed with hope. Free at last, she wrote. I smiled, proud she'd made it out. Word trickled back through old Boise contacts. Greg and Diane's house was a disaster, no utilities, junk piling up. Diane's theft charge stuck. She got probation, fined heavy, her diner job gone. Greg sold his truck to pay bills, but the drinking didn't stop. Neighbors saw him staggering, yelling at shadows. A buddy from the warehouse drove by. Place looks abandoned, man. They're toast. Sophie called one night, voice steady. Mom tried guilting me, sent a letter to the dorm. We're sorry. Need help. I tore it up. Dad called too, drunk, begging. Blocked him. Good, I said, sprawled on my couch. They don't deserve you. You ever think about them? She asked, Softer. Sometimes, I admitted. Not enough to care. They chose this. Yeah, she sighed. I'm done too. Weeks later, a letter slipped under my door. No return address. Greg scrawl. Ethan, we're losing the house. Mom's a wreck. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I stared at it, the old ache flaring, then shredded it. Sorry didn't erase theft, eviction, fist on Jake's door. The order barred contact. I'd report it if he pushed. I tossed the pieces, the past staying dead. Jake noticed my quiet at work. They reaching out? He asked, stacking crates. Trying, I said, shrugging. Not biting. Smart, he replied. You're good now, don't look back. I didn't. Nampa's routine, work, cheap dinners, late-night drives, fit me. Sophie thrived at college, her calls full of classes and friends. One evening, she visited, pizza in hand. They're gone from me, she said, slicing a piece. House is foreclosed, mom's with a cousin, dad's God knows where. Better off, I said, clinking her soda can. We are. She nodded, eyes clear. The ties were broken, Greg and Diane fading, us rising. Peace felt close. 2 years after that Christmas betrayal, Nampa was my anchor, a steady job, a small circle of friends, a life I'd carved from the wreckage. My studio had grown homier, a Real bed, a TV from Jake, photos of Sophie pinned to the fridge. She'd blossomed at Boise State, a sophomore now, majoring in biology, her dorm a world away from Greg and Diane's chaos. We'd cut them off, a clean break, and the silence felt like victory. The last threads unraveled quietly. Sophie heard through a high school friend. The Boise house foreclosed, sold at auction. Diane moved to a cousin's trailer in Caldwell, waitressing again, her pride stripped. Greg vanished, rumors said a shelter, maybe rehab, his drinking a final ruin. I didn't dig for details, they didn't matter. The restraining order held, no calls, no letters after that shredded plea. They'd faded into shadows, their own undoing complete. Sophie visited one spring weekend, her beat-up hatchback parked outside my place. We grilled burgers on a cheap hibachi, the air warm with promise. They tried calling last month, she said, flipping a patty. Blocked numbers, mom's voice. Then dad's. Same crap, we're sorry, come back. Deleted the voicemails. Smart, I said, sipping a Coke. They'll never change. Nope, she agreed, smiling. I'm good classes, friends. You. Same, I replied. Warehouse bumped me to supervisor, decent pay. No looking back. She nodded, eyes on the sizzling meat. We made it, Ethan. Without them. Yeah, I said, the weight of it settling. We did. That night, alone, I stood by my window, Nampa's lights flickering below. Greg's burden, label, Diane's theft. They'd stung once, but not now. I'd paid their way, kept them afloat, and they'd thrown me out. Calling the cops, filing that order, it wasn't revenge, just survival. Sophie's escape proved it. We weren't the problem. They were. Jake texted later, heard your old man's in jail, bar fight. Mom's broke. You good? I replied, better than ever. And I was. No guilt, no regrets, just a life mine to shape. Sophie and I stayed tight, her visits a lifeline. But Greg and Diane? They were ghosts, their downfall a faint echo I'd never chase. The ties were severed, and I stood taller for it, free, at last, in a world we'd built ourselves.